ولا زالت الأسهم الأمريكية مستقرة إلى حد كبير في ظل هذا التباين ما بين أسهم التكنولوجيا والقطاعات مثل الرعاية الصحية والطاقة اليوم التي ترتفع، بينما أسهم التكنولوجيا وأسهم الدورية أيضا تتراجع خلال هذه الجلسة. قد يتغير المشهد وخصوصا مع ما قد يأتي من قرار يوم غد. معنا سنديب شرما ورئيس قسم الاستثمار في سنتكس كابيتال. أهلا بك سنديب معنا. هل تعتقد من الممكن أن يطل علينا جيروم باول يوم غد لابسا قبعة سانتا كلوز؟
Always, it's a pleasure to be on your show always. I don't think Chairman Powell is going to comply tomorrow. I think, for better or worse, he's taken a very hard line in the sand, and as he is exiting out, I don't think he'll give the markets what the markets are looking for. Nonetheless, the markets have adapted to the idea that he will be out, and his comments are going to be, maybe they'll move the markets a little bit tomorrow, but they're not going to be significant.
طيب، من الممكن أن تفسر لنا سنديب ما الذي يفكر فيه اليوم المستثمر في أسواق السندات؟ عادة ما نقول عنهم اليوم السمارت انفسترز، سمارت ماني، وهي قد تكون لديها إشارات أكثر مما يحدث في أسواق الأسهم. هذا الارتفاع الذي شهدناه مؤخرا في العوائد وصولا إلى جلسة يوم أمس، حيث وصلت عوائد 10 سنوات لأعلى مستوياتها في 3 أشهر، في ظل نحن نمر في فترة تيسيرية في السياسة النقدية، ما الذي يحدث هنا؟
So there is a lot of cross currents going on in the bond market. As you very correctly noted, the 10-year Treasury for the U.S. Treasuries had been trending down, got below, just a little bit below 4%, and as you noted, it's now moved back up to about 4.18% range. There is some concern about inflation. However, I don't think the concern about inflation are very significant. I think we expect the U.S. Treasury yields to trend down to maybe the 3.8, 3.5% range next year. Also, within the Treasury market, there are some other factors at play. There is a little bit of a concern at the repo market, which seems to have subsided right now. And I think we're probably going to find that the Fed is going to start buying treasuries somewhere to the tune of $45 billion. So the quantitative tightening process is over, easing is beginning. And what is ironic is that the market is ramped up significantly, even though the Fed had been tightening. So it's a very odd situation in the markets where people expect the markets to decline when there is tightening. Instead, the equity markets have ramped up quite a bit.
سنديب، نحن الآن في آخر أسابيع من العام 2025، وهو الوقت الذي نعود لنقيم فيه المحافظ المالية. دعني أسألك سنديب، هل ستفعل كما يقوم اليوم إدي أرديني بفعله، وهو خفض وزن الماجنيفيسنت 7 في البورتفوليو؟
I would certainly pare back, don't have to cut back, but I would certainly add allocation to other areas. In the past 3-4 months, I've been discussing with you the idea of catching up to the laggard sectors, two namely of healthcare and energy. And if you look at the last 3 months, technology is leading the markets, but the following sectors, number 2 and number 3, are healthcare and energy. Also, if you look at the market from a quantitative standpoint, the best performing quantitative factor this year is the value factor, even better than momentum factor, even though momentum has done very well. And the last 3 months, the value factor is leading by quite a big margin, whereas momentum factor is barely up around 2% or so. Additionally, I would note that there are other areas in the market which have started to catch up quite a bit, namely in the small cap and mid cap area. So that kind of suggests that the money is not really leaving the market. There is a time for rotation, perhaps even rotation to interest sensitive areas of the market. I'm not quite sure now is the time to put all of your chips in that area, but I would certainly start to look at areas with respect to on the quantitative side, in quality factor, in minimum volatility factor, probably some areas of the market which are interest rate sensitive. And I certainly think healthcare and energy should continue to catch up next year, if we have a little bit of an up and down year next year.
سنديب، الولايات المتحدة مقارنة مع الخارج الولايات المتحدة، الأكس يو اس انترناشونال ستوكس، كان أدائها فعليا، هي تفوقت في الكثير من الأسواق الناشئة، في الأسواق الأوروبية تفوقت على الأسهم الأمريكية لو نظرنا عليها كمؤشرات. هل تعتقد بأن هذا التفوق قد يستمر العام القادم أم أنها فقط لمرة واحدة؟
I think it's a little bit skewed. I think early part of this year we saw a significant catch up in FX area of the market where the euro rebounded quite a bit, and also in emerging market we saw a significant outperformance of Chinese equities. If you look at KWEB, the China Technology ETF, that has done exceedingly well, as well as if you look at Brazilian market has done very well. So those are two components that have done significantly well. If you look at other prominent components of the emerging markets, namely India, the Indian rupee has hit an all-time low versus the US dollar. So the dynamic or the opportunities don't look very promising overseas. They also don't look very promising in Europe. So I think probably US is a better place to be next year. And I would start to cut back some of the exposure in emerging markets.
من اليوم فقط يستثمر في المؤشرات، هل تعتقد اليوم ال S&P 500 ك ETF يعني يعتبر فيه نوع من الخطورة، وخصوصا عندما ننظر إلى الأوزان الأسهم الكبيرة فيه، أسهم التكنولوجيا، أسهم ال AI، أم أنك لازلت ترى أن هكذا نوع من passive investments يعني قد يستمر، وخصوصا بعد مكاسب أكثر من 20% العام الماضي والعام الذي سبق، ونحن نقترب من مكاسب أيضا بحوالي 17% لهذا العام؟
Well, I think S&P is still going to be okay. However, the smart investor should start looking away from the S&P because, as you quite accurately noted, it is very heavily dominated by 10-15 stocks, and they've done exceedingly well. So my suggestion would be to look at, peel the onion layer and go a little bit deeper and look for quality factor as a way of investing in the US, as well as investing in the minimum volatility factor. I think the value factor still looks appealing, and I would overweight those areas instead of continuing to stay invested in the broad market. I would also encourage investors to start looking at mid-cap and small caps. They look very appealing.
سنديب شرما، رئيس قسم الاستثمار في سنتكس كابيتال، شكرا جزيلا لك.
Always a pleasure, and I wish you and your investors the very best in 2026.
كل عام وانت بألف خير.